Hey, everybody, it's KJ, and this is a special treat that I'm putting together. I thought it would be kind of cool for you guys to know what goes on behind the scenes when somebody gets this crazy idea to do a podcast. So, the Service Trucks USA idea is my idea to create a community for field mechanics. And what I mean by community is there's a group of us that benefit who derive our income in and around a service truck. So the service truck is the anchor. And then there's a lot of different people that depend upon the service truck. There's the guys that operate the service trucks. They're the guys that buy the service trucks. There's the guys that build the service trucks. And of course, there's all the salespeople that are involved in all of the different components, because that service truck is kind of the linchpin of an entire multi-billion-dollar industry. So I decided to kind of group everybody together, create this community, and with the hope of educating, informing, and entertaining some folks. And of course, I hope to make a little money because, the boy's unemployed now. You know how that is. Oh, okay. So this is a behind the scenes extra podcast. It really doesn't have anything to do with service trucks. This is more about the creation of the podcast and what actually goes into the podcast and how we went about it, and some of the challenges that I faced over the last year as I've tried to do this. So the first thing I did is I decided I wanted to do a podcast, and I realized that all these YouTube videos probably weren't going to do the job. So then I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it right. So I went out and found a real live podcast coach, and his name was Tim Wahlberg. And he has a company, and pay him a fee, and it's soup to nuts, man. And it was like a crash course, master's level crash course with everything that you could possibly need to do a podcast. And it kind of reminded me of being back in school, because I didn't want to do the work, man. I had homework and all kinds of stuff. So it was frustrating, but I did go through it. And like most things that I've done in my past, once I finally got to the point where I halfway was proficient, I skipped the rest of the class and started broadcasting the podcast. And of course, that created chaos and a mess. And then I got intimidated and shut everything down last year and kind of got scared. Well, since then, I'm back at it. And I wanted to describe to you kind of what's going on and what goes on in case one of you gets the harebrained idea to do your own podcast. So in order to do this properly, I brought my local sound engineer. His name's Gabe Vasquez, and he operates his own business as a sound engineer. He does music videos, and he does podcasts, and he does large events. He's a full-fledged sound engineer. And I found him online one day, and we reached out, and we both live here, and we're both in San Antonio. So we hooked up, and he was kind enough to sound engineer a couple of my podcasts so far. And because I prefer having face-to-face meetings, I'm at Gabe's studio today. And I said, you know what, why don't we see if we can create our own podcast today and kind of give guys a behind-the-scenes understanding of what goes in to making a decent podcast. So let me bring my boy, Mr. Gabe, online. Hey, Gabe, how you doing, bro?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me, Kenny.
Well, I appreciate it. And what we are doing today is we are preparing for next week's Work Truck Week, NTEA. It's going to be in Indianapolis, and I'm going to be up there for a week, and I've got a media pass. Woo-hoo-hoo, I got a media pass. I'm official. And I'm going to be doing interviews. And last year I was terrified, man. They came out okay, but I was scared. So I decided to sit down with Gabe and practice. So we have our setup here. And what I wanted to have you guys understand is Gabe's an expert. I'm going to let him take over now. Gabe, what has been your experience? And just talk a little bit about your background and your qualifications as a sound engineer. What exactly do you do, bro?
So I am a mix engineer and producer. I do a lot of that in music, but I've been doing sound editing, sound engineering for about 15 years. I interned at Watermelon Records over in Austin, Texas. I've worked freelance here and around the city of San Antonio. Worked out with one of my bosses who together we were able to get him a Grammy in 2009.
Get out of town.
Yeah.
You got a Grammy?
Yeah.
Sweet.
So, so other than that, I mean, now podcasting is now taking the world by storm, and it's been doing that since probably 2016. So a lot of the focus has been going into dialogue and spoken word, and it's quite an adventure because depending on where we do our podcast, sometimes we're not going to do it in a studio setting. In fact, we're here in my studio, but as you can probably hear, and I'll probably put this in the edit, Kenny's right below my air conditioner, and he can hear all that. But this is a great example that we could be in all sorts of elements, and we have to be ready for that. And so we're going to be going ahead, and he's going to learn how to gain stage, and we're going to take Spark Notes so that he can survive this year's NTEA convention, and he's going to do it flawlessly and beautiful. And I know that this year's podcast and what we have in the works is going to be amazing, and you guys are in for a real treat.
So one of the things that I wanted to discuss, Gabe, is that, man, there's so much crap involved. There's all these little things, and he's throwing out all these acronyms, and he's talking about gain and positive and blow and blah, blah. And dude, I'm old, man. I'm going, what the heck are you talking about? But Gabe's here to make my stuff easier. So what I wanted to give you guys is a little background. So I told you I had this guy, Tim Wahlberg, who's my coach. And what he did is, the first thing he says is, look, I'm a professional. You're going to be a professional. I've been doing this for 25 years. And so we're going to come at this with a plan. And the plan was, who's your audience? And then he said, visualize your customer. So I have a buddy named Kevin. You hear about him because I try and do everything for Kevin, my boy Kevin. Man. When I do a podcast, I'm thinking, wonder what Kevin would like this. Will he going to fall asleep? Is he going to listen? So they impressed that upon me. The next thing they said is, I had to lay out 52 shows, dude. I had to lay out 52 shows. And Tim, I'm sorry, but this one wasn't on the list. but I had to lay out 52 shows because this rambling idea of just doing whatever you want to do can kind of get boring for the audience. Now, segue here. I have a gentleman that I have admired. I've been listening to this dude since I was 18 years old. Traveling at night, coming back from a job or whatever. And I'd listen to them. It was talk radio. And there was this dude named Dennis Prager, had a show called Religion on the Line. And that dude was as close to my personal pastor or whatever you want to call him. He's a Jewish dude, but he was always talking about Christianity. And the thing that made him so fascinating is that his voice became like this comfort to me. And that's one of the goals of the podcast is, when you hear me, I want you guys to feel like you're hanging with your boy, just hanging out in your backyard. We're sitting there, you got your beer, I got my water, and we're just chilling, and we're just hanging out, two guys being buddies, looking out, talking to each other, hanging out, and just, talking about life. And that's the goal for the podcast. The second thing is, when I got to thinking about Dennis Prager and why he was so interesting to me, is that he always was prepared, man. That dude always had the answers. He was ready for dang near anything, and you learned. And so I didn't think that me doing a podcast or rambling was going to be beneficial for you guys. So I always wanted to come at you guys with something that you could learn, something you could benefit from, so that when you're done listening to the show, you go, man, that was a good investment of my time. And then the last thing is, I got to keep it interesting. So why do I have to keep it interesting? It's because you're not going to believe this, but I was on an airplane about 3 weeks ago, and I get on the plane because I fly a lot, and I got on the plane first, and I go up and I'm going down the aisle, and I look up and I see this kind of heavy set dude. He's tall, 6'3", 6'4", shock of white hair. And I look at him and I said, wow, excuse me, sir. Have you ever been told that you bear a striking resemblance to Dennis Prager? And he looks at me and he goes, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I have. and then I heard his voice like, oh my God, it's Dennis Prager. So we're both sitting on the exit row of the Southwest flight. And I'm going, take your shot. Take your shot. Kenny, take your shot. This may be the only chance. You've been listening to this dude for 50 years. Take your shot. So I said, excuse me, Mr. Prager, but I wanted to let you know how much you've meant to me over the years, and how much I've enjoyed your shows over the years, all your shows, and what you're doing right now with Prager University is changing lives. You know, it's a multi-million-dollar enterprise that he's funding. And I just said, man, you're making a difference and I enjoy it. And he goes, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And he was with some famous lady from Eastern Europe that was also a radio show host that, you know, he was traveling with. But I said, would you mind could you share just a few tidbits of guidance for me because I'm launching this podcast? And he asked me, what's the name of the podcast? And I told him, and I got a 15-minute one-on-one coaching session from Dennis Prager.
That's wild.
Man, that was so freaking cool. And here's the number one takeaway from that meeting. He says, be interesting. Because you're asking these guys to give them your time. Don't waste their time. Make it interesting. So that's the background story. So when we talk about this podcast, understand that there's a lot of things that go into it that you guys may not be aware of. So right now we're going to go into the nitty gritty. What kind of equipment does a guy need if he wants to be a podcaster, ad hoc podcaster from home? What does he need?
Honestly, if he wants to do it at home, an interface, maybe some...
Yo. There's some of them words again, man. What the heck's an interface, man?
First of all, apologies. So an interface is basically think of it as a mixer, but what it does is it actually converts analog audio signal into digital signal.
Okay. So for us that are not experts in the topic, why do I need to convert something from analog to digital?
Well, unfortunately, in this day and age, we don't run anything to tape anymore. We don't have records. We don't have tape. We don't even have CDs anymore.
Oh, okay. So those were considered analog.
Those were considered analog.
Okay.
Actually, I got to work with some over at at a couple of studios where we actually were running a microphone that's connected to a cable into a big old mixer, and that mixer was then connected to reels of tape. And they would run over, and if somebody messed up in the studio, some guy hit a wrong note, we would actually have to rewind the tapes, literally physically take the reel and move it and rewind it backwards, cut the tape, put on some new tape and glue it.
Splice it.
We're splicing it.
Oh my goodness.
So this was the old school way. Now, in this day and age, what we have is digital, where the signal gets converted into ones and zeros, zeros and ones. And now we can, if we mess up, it's just deleting it and redoing it again.
That makes sense.
But it takes a special device. Now, here's the great thing. These devices now are very, very inexpensive.
Okay.
You can buy one for $100 that does a pretty good job.
And don't a lot of our computers now come standard with a lot of these interfaces and tools, right? They're making it a little easier.
So not with audio interfaces, but they do come with software. If you're running a Windows-based machine, there's very cheap digital audio workstations. That's what we like to call them, or DAWs. And there's one called Reaper, which is really, really good. It's starting to take off. And a lot of producers, a lot of big studios are starting to use it. Well, guess what? For a full version, it's $40.
$40? I can afford that.
Now, a little history on Reaper. It's actually made by the guys back in the 90s. They had this old like wave audio player. Actually, the Windows Media Player, they were made by those guys. They made a lot of money. And so they said, hey, let's make a digital audio workstation. We're not going to charge much. In fact, here's another great secret. They have an unlimited demo trial. They'll be like, hey, do you think you want to pay us? And just hit no, and you can use the full version for as long as you want.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
If you don't want to spend $40, just keep hitting no when you start it up.
Oh, man. Don't tell anybody. That's a secret.
That's one of the dirty secrets, you know?
That's cool.
Kenny, you know a lot of dirty secrets of the service truck trade.
Yes, I do. I know a few. So the next thing is you've got to have this mixer, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. So those of you that are listening to this podcast more than likely subscribe to other podcasts. And I think you've heard when the sound isn't quite right. You know, somebody's mic is a little hot, meaning they're louder than the other person, or you hear background noise or static and all those types of things. And me, I'm kind of a snob when it comes to audio, and I frankly can't listen to bad audio. I don't care the subject. It just irritates me so much that I'm just going to switch to the next podcast, because there's literally hundreds of thousands of podcasts to choose from. So I'm just going to go find another one. So my goal for my podcast is to make it sound like it's a professionally produced podcast, which it is, because I pay people. That's produced. That's professional.
This is true.
So we want good sound. So the next thing that's necessary is what, Gabe? You got this mixer, and then what? What do you need?
So we were talking about our audio interface. We talked about our workstation. Now we do need to talk about how are we going to get that audio into the computer, and this comes with microphones. So with microphones, great thing is that there's been a lot of microphones in the market. They've been making them since like the 1920s. And those microphones are pretty expensive now, but they're a piece of history. But now we have such great technology where we can get microphones that have very low floor noise at a very affordable price. Actually, off the air, Kenny and I were talking about, there's a secret. I'll give y'all guys a secret. That secret is, those big old SM7Bs, like the ones you see on Joe Rogan's podcast, they're like $400 each. But you can buy what's called a Shure SM57. It is the exact same thing, just without the lower bass response, for $99. $100.
And then you need that cover for it, right?
Just get the windscreen.
And you're basically getting, for all intents and purposes, a $400 mic for a little over $100.
Exactly.
Okay. See, that's why you listen to Service Trucks USA. We give you the inside scoop on the secrets.
Always.
Okay. So you're going to need a couple of mics, more than likely, because you're going to record a guest. Now, something that I haven't done, but I went ahead and made sure I had the capability of doing it. And that is, you're not always going to be in the same physical building with your guests, right? So if you're going to do a podcast, sometimes you're going to want to record them remotely, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but there is an app and there's a service that we can use that can give us broadcast quality recording capability. It typically only requires a mic, a little bit of an upgraded mic than what you would have embedded in your laptop. Mm-hmm. And you just plug that into the USB and go to work, and we can record you remotely and get this same quality of sound. And it's almost indistinguishable between having you in the studio versus being remote.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of services. One of them is actually called Adobe Podcast Editor. All you would do is, with your audio files, you just drag and drop them into, and it's actually web-based. So you just go to the website, drag and drop your file in there, and it will clean it up for you. Now, if there's the downside to that would be if you wanted something in particular, like, oh, I want more bass response, or I want this, or I want to add in this sound. This is just to clean up your audio, but it does 80% of the work for you.
Wow, that's cool. So that's another thing you can have. Now, you're typically going to need some headsets, right? Why are headsets? You don't have to have them, I don't think, but why are they important?
They're important for monitoring the sound. Sometimes we won't be able to gauge the gain stage, meaning that we might have
he's using one of those words again. Okay. Gain stage.
So the gain stage is basically how much power. Let's do it in an analogy of like this. How much water we're actually opening up on the faucet. Okay, we can put it as a little bit of a dribble, or we can just put it full force and we're just letting water run through the faucet. So our gain stage is basically how much volume. Now we have to kind of gauge it to where if we have it very hot, it'll pick up room sounds. It'll pick up my dog that's in the backyard. And then if we laugh or we project very strongly, we could overload the interface and we might get like a really distorted, crunchy sound. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for something that's going to be smooth and clear and transparent.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because last year I was a green pea, real green pea, and I was recording at NTA, and I was recording out in the hallway, a public hallway, and I just kind of found a little alcove to set up in. And because I had the right equipment, and because of the settings, I was able to basically pull out all that ambient noise. And you did it with, with your engineering techniques. You were able to take out a lot of those extra sounds, and those audios came out really well. I think, those came out good.
Absolutely. And I think another thing to also keep in consideration is the context. Now, and this is usually my engineering head. I'm not looking for an absolute isolated voice for the guest or the interviewer. If the context is we are at the NTEA convention, but what we want to do is just make sure that we can fade that into the background and make sure that the two voices that are having a conversation are at the front and center, and we don't have voices that are taking away from the flow of conversation. They are just in the background, and more than likely, if we were to implement video, you would definitely notice this. But always keep in mind where you're at and basically the context of that. Now, if we are in let's say like in a professional studio, and then we want to make sure that it's quieter, of course. But considering that we're going to be doing mobile recording here in the next couple of weeks, or
not even, man, we're done in like 7 or 8 days, bro.
Okay. Well, in the next couple of days, we're going to be doing mobile recording. We just have to make sure that we keep that in mind. So if I were to give you guys any advice as to if you guys were in Kenny's shoes and you guys were doing this, maybe I shouldn't give them the secrets. What do you think?
Yeah, they're going to be my subscribers, so that they get secrets here.
Okay. So I would definitely look into less is always more. As long as you can hear yourself comfortably, but you're not really loud. If you're starting to hear the audience really loud, very clearly, that means that you might have your gain pots or like your microphone levels a little too loud. Just bring them down a tad, and remember, background noise is okay in this situation.
That makes sense. So, guys, listen. The whole idea behind the podcast is to share stories, share information, entertain an audience. It's basically entertainment on demand rather than a radio show dictating what you listen to. The idea behind a podcast is, I could kick back, relax. I got a 2-hour drive. I can listen to, Service Trucks USA. KJ's going to have a guest on that I might learn a little bit about. And your voice needs to be heard too. You may be a subject matter expert on a particular topic. So more power to you, man. Get out there and record your podcast. If it's something you've been thinking about doing, then do it. The one thing I've learned over the last couple of years is that tomorrow doesn't wait for nobody, bro. If you want to do it, you got to do it. You got to bite the bullet and be brave, get past your fears and go for it. If I've got one person that enjoys this podcast, then I'm okay. I'm not doing this to get rich. That does not mean that you can't pay me. I do like getting money. So if you come up with a way to get a little money, that's good. But the main thing is enjoy yourself. Do something you love and share stories. Tell people about things that you know. I think you've got probably some of you are just walking encyclopedias of knowledge, especially some of you OGs, my original gangsters, the old boys that have been turning wrenches for 40 years. When you're gone, all that knowledge is going to go down the tubes, and you're going to be welcome to come on this show because that's what I'm about. I'm about you guys, but I'm only going to do one podcast a week, and there's a lot of stories out there. So some of you should probably start your own podcast, and we can network together and share each other's ideas and share each other's podcasts. So the goal today is to let you know that podcasting isn't as terrifying as it sounds. It is manageable. If you want to do it right, I'll put a link on my page to my podcast coach. If you want a remote sound engineer, I've got Gabe. I've got another one in LA, and they're great. They're fantastic. They're conscientious. It's affordable. you can make a little money on podcasts, but that's not really my objective for this podcast. And I want to let you know that the equipment is affordable. I bought everything on Amazon. My coach told me what to buy. I met my coach before I met Gabe. So, there's always going to be opinions, but Gabe's looked at my equipment and he gave me a thumbs up, right?
Absolutely.
It was good. And hopefully you're listening to this and you hear the sound quality, and it wasn't prohibitively expensive. So go for it. That's the moral of the story. If you got stories to tell, you got buddies you want to entertain, or you want to, have conversations with your buddies, or, your wife, whatever, then create a podcast.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's a learning process. You're going to make mistakes. And the thing is that success doesn't come without failures. So keep doing it.
There is one thing that I forgot to mention that I'm going to mention now, and that is, how do you incorporate video? Now, we haven't done that yet, but how am I going to do that?
So, yeah, let's talk about that. Well, there's a couple ways. If you do buy, let's say you do buy an interface that we talked about, it's a little bit more difficult because then you have to sync your audio with your video. Now, if you do have, there are options, like Zoom makes the P4, podcast P4.
That's this one, the one I'm using, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
What's great about that is that it has an option to sync your camera with the recording station. So when you hit record, the camera also records.
Does it do it? It does it by Bluetooth, or does it do it through hardwire?
It does it through hardwire.
Okay. Some
of them do it through hardwire. Bluetooth, it depends if your camera is also Bluetooth enabled. I always say sometimes we have to stay a little old school, and hardwire is always going to be the more secure. It's always going to be the more secure option, because Bluetooth can be finicky sometimes. And then you have to resync it, post.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then you got to hire me.
Gotcha. So how does that work? Do you find that you broadcast those on YouTube in conjunction with your podcast, or do you do it? What's the best way to incorporate video into storytelling?
Well, that's the thing. It depends on a lot of things, because there's so many there's a couple of subgenres in podcasting. We can go the live route. Let's go ahead and do a scenario where you're at the NTEA convention, and hopefully I'm saying that right. NTEA.
Yeah.
Okay. And you want to go ahead and go live, and you're, let's say, the Maintner booth, or you're in one of those booths, and you're gonna do it right then and there. You can set up a notification for your subscribers saying, "Hey, I'm gonna be live at 5:00 with this company," and you can go live and do it live. Or we can do it where we set up videos, say okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and do a video, do post, and that way you can do all the editing and stuff like that. So it just depends on where you're coming from, but both work just as well.
Okay. I've noticed that a lot of the companies are coming out with cooler and cooler tools that make it so much easier to edit your photos and your videos and create these things called Reels. I mean, Instagram has it, Facebook has it. I'm still against TikTok. I refuse to download that sucker, but I might have to break down and do it. But they
use
all
a burner
have
phone.
Yeah, exactly. They all have tools that allow you to quickly engage your audience. They're looking for eyeballs, and they're making it easier and easier for you to get eyeballs. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. And really, and I'm going to be praising them all the time, because I just did the last time about the whole audio editing or podcast editing. Adobe Suite is great. They actually have a mobile app to where you can then send your video over to that mobile app, and it just does it all for you. If you wanted to do portrait, 9:16, that's the resolution for Instagram, TikTok, and all of those. It does it automatically for you.
I actually have it. Didn't know I had it.
Yeah.
I have that suite. I use Audition for my audio recording on my laptop, and then I've got the whole Adobe suite of products. They got way cool stuff on there.
Yeah, check your account and check the mobile section. Mm-hmm. It could be in your account, and all you got to do is just go to if you have Google, if you have like an Android, go to Google Play. If you have Apple, go to your App Store on Apple and just download it, and then put in your sign-in information, and there you go. You got it.
So let me see if I understand that correctly. So you just record your video with your phone, mm-hmm. and then just load it on this app, and it automatically converts it so that it's suitable for broadcast on
Exactly.
YouTube or one of those others?
Absolutely. And then not only that, let's say you recorded in landscape mode, you can then pick and choose. Let's say you do you're side by side with your guest. You can then zoom into you when you're talking, and then zoom into your guest when you're talking, but all in 9:16.
And you can edit the one feed from the,
Exactly.
you don't have to have two cameras anymore.
No, not at all.
Dang, dude. I'm going to have a little radio station, TV station there in a minute.
I'm telling you. I mean, with a mobile phone, an interface, or if you have one of these like Zoom P4s, 2 microphones, 2 headphones, that's all you need, and you're ready to go.
All right. So, boys and girls, that is your Service Trucks USA podcast bonus episode that we're putting together for you to give you some inspiration so that you too can tell your stories. Don't be afraid. I'm not a subject matter expert yet, but I do know some badass friends. Remember, I told you I got some badass friends, and Gabe's one of them. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little diversion away from service trucks. We appreciate you. Have a fantastic day.
Awesome. And subscribe, guys.
Gabe, you want to tell them your handle, your email address in case they want to follow up with you directly?
Absolutely. So my email is going to be gabe.vasquez@gmail.com. That's VASQUEZ, Gabe, GABE. So gabe.vasquez@gmail.com. And then my Instagram, that's usually where I do a lot of my business. That's going to be boomchi_music. That's BOOMCHII_music. Go ahead and add me, check me out. You can check out all of the work that I've done. I also have a playlist of a lot of my projects that I've worked on. And that's what I'm doing.
So for you guys that are closet musicians, singers, and you're wondering how do I get my stuff, broadcast? Well, you got another friend now. So thank you so much, you guys, for listening. We appreciate it. And you have a fantastic day.
See ya.
Bye. Subscribe right now to Service Trucks USA on your favorite platform so you'll never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Service Trucks USA. That's Service TRUX USA, where you'll get even more great content, discussions, and resources related to vocational service trucks. I look forward to getting to know each of you better. Until then, keep your fingers dirty and your nose clean. This is your guy, your man, your dude, KJ, signing off.